A few months back, while scrolling through my Insta handle, I came across a reel of this young teen who was about to give her math board exam the next day. And she was talking about having a bad relationship with the subject. Now, I am somebody who hardly ever finds any kind of content on social media relatable, especially through bookstagrammers. But she reminded me of my own situation a day prior to the exam of my most horrifying subject. Since then, I started following her. I was amazed to see her review books and talk about the same stuff that excited me as well, from F1 to cricket, from MUNs to theatre. So when it came down to inviting the first guest for my show, I knew I wanted her. And the sweet soul that she is, she replied to a girl with just 100 odd followers, even agreeing for a sit down conversation about anything and everything. Here's presenting to you the most loved Indian teen bookstagrammer, a grade 11 student who is the reason for thousands of people to pick up a novel and proudly beam with joy about the fact that they got out of a reading slump. Not just this, she is also an author and an intern at 16. Today, I have the honor of welcoming the supremely talented Miss Anya Chand.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. I mean, it's a big deal.
Okay, right off the bat, my first question to you.
Mm.
I'm no beer biceps. I don't run a popular podcast. So, why did you agree to do this?
Well, I think you are a bigger nerd when it comes to this, obviously, and then so am I. You might think that, okay, 34K is a big number, and it is. I mean, I'm extremely grateful for it. But not only was it almost instant the way that my audience like built up, 34K is also not a very, very big number. Like there's going to be lots of influencers you'll find on Instagram which are like 10 times, 15 times my number. So, one thing is I started as a beginner, so I want to give other beginners a chance. And second thing is I'm still pretty tiny, so nobody else is asking me to do any of these interviews as of yet. So I'll take what I can get. And also, like, I again truly want to give new people a chance.
That's really gracious of you, Anya. Because you mentioned about, your followers increasing pretty spontaneously. I mean, I do remember actually coming across your handle even before that viral math reel came out. And at the time, I don't think you were even around 1,000 followers, if I'm not wrong. And then suddenly it was like over 30K. So, what was the experience like to go viral overnight? What was your family's reaction, your friends' reaction?
Well, first of all, I had been making content for 3 years before that. So, I mean, none of us thought this was ever happening, that it was ever going to click. And the reel itself was not something that is very niche to me. I mean, it was completely out of my comfort zone, not something I make very, very often. So, one thing is, I didn't expect it. And when it did blow up, not only was I very excited, but all my friends were like, "Oh my god, Anya! Like, what have you created? Like, this is very interesting." And then, I mean, my parents were very proud, and my brother was very, very excited as well because he has a blog of his own. So we understand how it is to make content ceaselessly and only have one of those reels blow up. So for me, it was like, okay, it's about time. It is about time. Like I have been working so hard. So I mean, it was only a matter of time, which is why I was excited. But it wasn't something I expected at all.
Okay. You also mentioned about making content for about 3 years. So, no matter how
Hmm.
much you say that you weren't really expecting to get this popular, somewhere at the back of your mind, that thing was there, right? Ki, I do want to blow up and I do want
Yeah.
to obviously become popular. So,
Yes.
tell me something. I have just started actually making content for 3 months, and sometimes it does make me feel like I'm not even crossing, a certain number that I actually set for myself initially. What advice would you give to those people who are just starting out and are not, they're feeling low, they're feeling like, okay, I want to do this but it's not happening. So how would you say that keep pushing yourself? It took me 3 years, it'll maybe take you more time, less time, whatever, but you'll get there.
Well, I would just say that the point of making content you might think is gaining followers, but one of five, one of five people get that. So like the way that those four other people keep themselves happy is by making content because they want to make content. So choose something that you're really passionate about. I mean, if you're making content about something that you are not passionate about, then you're going to be looking at the numbers a lot. But for me, the only thing that kept me going through those 3 years was, okay, one, my numbers aren't increasing, but at least I'm making content about something that I like, something that I take true pleasure in talking about. So if you are in love with your subject, then it's going to be very, very easy to like keep going. So focus on what you know and what you love, and the rest just follows.
So it's clear from your answer that your true love is definitely reading and writing, everything related to literature. But how did that begin?
Hmm.
Like, for most people, their answer is going to be Harry Potter. Okay, they started with Harry Potter. What was that like for Anya? How did reading begin?
I think for Anya, she had no interest in reading until like maybe the third or the fourth grade. And my mom had to quite literally push me into it because my mom, she's a reader, my brother, an academic. So in all the senses that mattered, I was the dumb one in the family. And then my mom was like, okay, Anya, like you have to start somewhere. So she pushed me to read Emily, what's her name? She pushed me to read Geronimo Stilton and Enid Blyton and everything in that genre. And I know that those are very simple books, but I started pretty late. So I started with those. I ended up reading Tom Gates and all of that, and that's what really made me excited about reading because I used to be able to finish like 3 books in say a week, and that made me feel so very you know larger than life. So I was very, very excited about that, and maybe it was the feeling of achieving something when you finish a book, or it was the fact that in fifth grade we were taught how to write, and then I thought, okay, if I'm going to be a writer, I have to also read. But it was like a combination of those two things.
When you were in your third or the fourth grade, obviously Geronimo Stilton was a good start because
Yes.
considering your age. But now that you're 16, if you come across somebody
Hmm.
who's also 16 and hasn't really, started to read, it's just not something that's clicked for them. What is gonna be
Hmm.
your number one advice? Like you should start with this. Like for everyone it's different, but what's gonna be your topmost recommendation?
Well, I'd say one thing I say that a lot of people are surprised by is no matter what age, start with children's books because they are made to capture your attention, and they are made specifically so that people who don't have a larger attention span can also sort of absorb the story. So I will always say, no matter what age you are, start with graphic novels, start with Tintin, or for me, I really liked reading Tinkle magazines. So that's also a kind of reading. It's not a novel, but at least it's a magazine. You can start from somewhere. So graphic novels, things with illustrations in them, children's books, start from there. And yeah, and if you feel like you might not be a reader, but still you are a little bit above graphic novels and children's books, then go for classics, which we read as children. So King Arthur, the Moonstone, Wind in the Willows, those things.
Now, this was your advice for reading. We spoke a bit about how you started reading and your recommendations. How did writing happen? I mean, not everyone who's an ardent reader can also be, a very fluent writer. It's not a fluid writer. It's a very natural thing, I think. Reading is something that most people can do, but being able to express yourself well in words it's a rarity. So, how did that come to Anya?
Well, I think back in the fifth grade, I had this wonderful teacher, and till today I credit her for my blog, for everything that I do. She had this course on narrative writing, and I wrote some very bad stories, which she made me read out to the class. So she essentially said, "Oh, you might be bad, but you're still better than the others." So then she made me read them out to the class, and again, I wasn't good, but my parents saw that, okay, at least this is something she likes to do. Of all the other activities that we've tried to put her in, this is one thing she actually looks as though she likes. So I started writing on one of these like small online publishing websites, and again, I was very bad for 2 3 years straight, but it was the constant like, oh, you know what, you'll get better, you'll get there sort of approach. And I did get there, I think. Like maybe again, wasn't great, but it was the only activity at that point that I actually liked doing. So of all the sports that my parents had invested in, of all the dance classes and singing classes. This was one thing that I was actually decent at. And in that sense, it was okay, maybe in 10 years she'll be nice. And it worked out for me that way.
So it took you about 5 6 years to reach this point where I think more than
Mm.
90% of the teen bookstagrammers that I see around, I find your poetry or writing to be better. So at the time, of course, when you were 10 11, whatever you wrote, you had a different method of writing, right? Now that you're
Yes.
16, what is the method that you follow? How do you go about writing your poetry? How do you go about writing your books? Or like, I mean, you've not written a book, you've written an anthropology, but how do you go about writing a story?
Well, if I'm to put this in comparison, when I was younger, I used to write it with a very like set structure that was taught to me. So again, my teacher in fifth grade, she taught us a very like simple structure. And up till I think the seventh or the eighth grade, that's just the way that I would write things. But now when I'm more, I would say, seasoned writer, for me, it's more about experimenting at this point. So I take inspiration from people who are the most prominent authors these days. Like if you look at Jhumpa Lahiri, her writing is very, very inspirational to me. If you look at Holly Jackson, her writing is inspirational to me. You read the good books and the bad books, and you end up borrowing things from them. And that's what I've been doing. Recently, I have begun to, steer away from the instructions that I was given in fifth grade, the structure that I was given in fifth grade, and I've started to experiment using other people's methods. I think with time, I will also make my own method, but for now, it's just about borrowing and learning from these people.
The reason why I asked you this question, and this is for my audience, if you don't know, Anya has written a book called Fairy Tales. It's an anthropology, a collection of the poems that she wrote. And it's something that obviously is a big achievement, especially considering her age. So I'm going to shift the momentum a bit and talk to her related to the book that she wrote. My first question to you, Anya, what is an anthropology? Because a lot of people don't know about it, they don't understand the concept. So firstly, what is it? And second of all,
Hmm.
um, how did you actually start writing poetry? Because it's not something that writing stories is, it's still fairly simpler, but poetry is something much more deeper. It needs to have that, deeper meaning. So did that
Hmm.
also happen to you just naturally, or maybe you were drawn to it, maybe you read poetry and then something clicked? Because for me personally, I started writing poetry just because I was reading a lot of poetry, and then it made sense to me, okay, let me also give this a shot. What was it like for you?
Yes. To answer your first question, an anthology is essentially a collection of something. So, an anthology can be of multiple short stories or multiple poems. My anthology is 35 poems put together into one book. That's how they usually work. And to answer your second question, poetry, yes, it happened naturally. And I actually don't even know when or how. It was just that I had been writing stories for a long time, and then eventually you get to a point where it becomes boring, or you want to try something new, or you think of yourself as a person who's now done everything in that one format. So you want to get into new things. I remember the first poet that I read was Rupe Kaur. And whatever your views might be about her, I know the audience doesn't exactly agree with me at all points, but she was one of the first authors who made me go like, okay, poetry, this is something I can do. And her writing, as you know, is fairly simple. It's fairly binary. So I thought, okay, if she can write this, I can write this. And that's how it clicked in my brain. So I don't know when or how, but I know where I got the inspiration from. And I also know that, it came out of boredom rather than interest.
I first want to apologize to Anya and to the audience. I think I just made a mistake. I wanted to say anthology myself, but I had a slip of tongue. And because you mentioned about not always, like you mentioned that not always will the audience agree with, the statements that you make. Let me ask you your honest opinion, because I wanted to ask you and almost all the guests on my show. Let's talk about this author called Colin Hoover. Now, she has been of
Hmm.
late getting a lot of hate. And when I first joined Instagram in 2019, she was the only one I thought that everybody was talking about her. Everybody was in love with her. Her books were like the topmost recommendations. And now I think that because of the cancel culture, the hate culture, maybe she doesn't write good books, maybe her writing isn't something that people like, but is she so terrible that I'm so scared to even pick up her book? I haven't picked up any one of her books after Verity, actually, because people are like, I'm scared people are going to judge me. They're going to, if I like the book, then I'm going to get cancelled. As a writer, you know what it feels like. Even a bad review can make your day, get completely ruined. What is your honest take? Do you think the hate is fair, or maybe this is getting very, exaggerated?
Okay, so I'll say three things here. One being that uh, Colleen Hoover is an author, and then she is a public figure, and those two things have to be separated. I mean, as an author, if you read some of her books, like Verity, again, as you mentioned, Verity has a very out of pocket plot, okay, and a lot of the things that are mentioned in the book extremely questionable. But I finished it in 4 hours, and books like that are written brilliantly because they are able to capture our attention. Because I was sitting on my bed reading a book by Colleen Hoover for like 4 hours straight. I know that she is a brilliant author. People write bad books, people write good books. Verity is a good book, therefore she is a good writer. Is she a good public figure? I don't know, because I haven't read up on the controversy that surrounds her. I mean, I know there was something about her son, and I know that she tried to make a coloring book out of her book about abuse. And okay, in those things, I am nobody to condemn or say that she did like a good job. So it's not up to me to say all of those things. But sorry, my finger. But as a writer, I've always thought of her as decent at best. She's not amazing, but she's not bad either. I'm sorry, my camera is doing something weird.
That's all right. That's all right.
Can
You
we
want
like
me?
can we rewind?
You want me
Yeah,
to pause?
let's go back a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Anya, I wanted to ask this question to almost every one of my guests who are going to be on this podcast. And that is that of late, I've noticed a certain author called Colleen Hoover. I'm just taking her as an example. There are many others as well. But I see a lot of hate directed towards her. A lot of, there's this whole movement that you have to hate her. You cannot be a good reader if you like her books, and that is one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I have been unable to pick her book after Verity, any book, because I feel if I like it, then I'm going to get cancelled. Even purchasing that book, any of her books, It Ends With Us, or any book from a bookstore, it makes me feel afraid that people are going to judge me. Do you think that hatred is fair? Or perhaps, you think that this is being exaggerated a lot?
Well, there's three things I have to say there. One is that there's Colleen Hoover, the public figure, the one who makes content on Instagram, the one who's making a movie out of her book, and then there's Colleen Hoover, the author. Now, every author writes good books and then bad books, and she's written tons of bad books. I mean, I've read almost all of them. But then she's also written one good book, which is Verity. Lots of questionable stuff there, but I did finish it in like 4 hours straight. I sat on my bed, and in 4 hours, I was done with the book, and I felt this extreme need to go find the special edition version to read more of it. So in that sense, you can never tell whether a person is a good or a bad author according to just one or two books that they've written. You have to look at the larger picture. So if I take Verity in my mind, yes, she's a good author. If I take other books in my mind, then she's probably just decent or just average. When you look at Pauline Hoover, the public figure, there's lots of things that I don't know. I haven't been reading up on on the controversy that's around her, and the little that I do know, I don't like. So if I was to talk about Pauline Hoover, the person, I would say, it's not my business. Second of all, if I don't like her books that much anyway, then there's no reason for me to get involved. And number three, the third very important thing that I would like to say is Bookstagram operates on trends. Okay. Today you're gonna wake up and you're gonna say, we love Colleen Hoover, and then give it like 3 days, one girl will make a TikTok about how she didn't like one of Colleen Hoover's books, and then 500 other people will follow. That's how it works. It's happened with Sarah J. Maas. It's happened with the author that wrote The Love Hypothesis. right? It's happened with the author that wrote The Spanish Love Deception. It's happening these days with J.K. Rowling. It's just gonna keep happening. So, base your opinions on how much you like a book and how much you have liked this author's previous books, and then move on from there. I'm not saying it's very easy to separate the art from the artist. Don't separate the art from the artist. Let's not support authors who are publicly making, havoc. But also think about what you like more than what other people like, and think about what you condemn and what other people condemn, and then create a differentiation. Because if you don't do that, then you don't really have an opinion. So with Pauline Hoover personally, I think her books are not that great. One of her books is very, very good. Her other books are not that great. So you know what? I don't read her books. I don't support her books, and I don't make content about her books. But if you do like her books, then you know what? It's nobody else's business. And maybe you can become part of an argument about it, or maybe you can debate it or justify it. But ultimately, just read it and get on with your life. I mean, we have other things to do. It's really not worth that much time and that much energy.
A follow-up question for that would be,